It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays, and I'm going to sort of tie in Wellness Wednesdays today to Monday's video about Johnny Depp and, talking about his childhood experiences and how adverse childhood experiences can prime you for abuse later in life. I just want to be clear that it's not a death sentence. I try to make sure that I give people useful stuff, not just depressing stuff. I find too much stuff that focuses on diagnosis of illness makes people feel like there's no hope they are this thing, as opposed to they have this thing. And this comes from my own journey with PTSD. It was really daunting to get that, well, you have a trauma condition, okay. You have post-traumatic stress. Okay, let's figure out what I'm going to do about it. Great. It's one of those things like high stigma, claims very difficult to treat. But there are a lot of challenges that used to be believed to be impossible to treat. Borderline personality disorder was one, but now they're finding dialectic behavioral therapy is very beneficial for people with borderline personality disorder. I would love if dialectic behavioral therapy got up there with cognitive behavioral therapy as sort of popularized, because I do think that the narratives people tell themselves about their experiences are powerful, and changing that story you tell yourself really, really aids in resilience. And so I'm doing this video in service of that. I don't do dialectic behavioral therapy, but changing those stories you tell yourself is a big part of the Leanna Cares service. And you know what's coming? Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Monthly support, very important. Or buy someone Leanna Cares session. You can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. I don't promote the service much now. There are still spots available on Wednesday and Thursday. They are limited, but if you want to get in, there is space available, and I am starting to do the occasional one off Wednesdays and Thursdays, though I really have to keep space for the game to work on Song of Sparkle Muffin. But yeah, so if you had a bad childhood, are you doomed? No. There's been a lot of things in the news of late about ACEs. I always adverse childhood experiences, and it's things like physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, the category they call household dysfunction, which is mental illness, an incarcerated relative, seeing one's mother treated violently, substance abuse in the home, and they list divorce. That one to me, it depends on how it's handled, right? Like, wow, okay. But if only one of these things happens to you as a kid, that does not mean you're scarred for life. The higher your ACE score is, the more likely you are to suffer mental and physical challenges later in life. They're actually finding that these sorts of things, heightened, prolonged periods of stress, can make people sick. I'm living proof. But just because you had a shitty childhood doesn't mean you're doomed. It's about building up that resiliency. It's about building up that ability to process and to move beyond it, that post-traumatic growth that doesn't get talked about nearly enough in the discussions of post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic growth is freaking great. That's where wisdom comes from. And I mean, when I talk to people one-on-one, or when I make these videos, this is what I'm drawing from. you hear the stories of my childhood and adolescence, and even my young adulthood. I grew up pretty rough. It was pretty rough experiences, pretty rough neighborhood, Um, but a lot of things are less scary now as a result, because I actively had to find my center. The center wasn't given to me as a default. And every so often, everybody gets thrown off, right? The problem when you've had difficulties and there are people that don't understand what that means around you, they think that someone struggling is a sign of, oh, something is terribly wrong, as opposed to, no, everybody struggles sometimes. How about you stop telling them about, oh, this must be your childhood trauma, and how about you ask them what they need now? Because you can't do anything about that childhood trauma. You can do something about making someone's life less crappy today. And I always get a real sense of usefulness when I can say to somebody, not just an "it gets better" platitude, but, this is what your life can be like. This is what your inner processes can be like. How does that sound? And everybody tends to say, well, it sounds pretty good. Various people believe me it's possible more than others, but I'm in a position to be able to say better is possible. And it's all a question of finding a roadmap to get there. People tend to wallow in the bad instead of putting the bad in its proper place and either building around it or filling the hole or building a bridge over it or whatever. Positivity, a positive outlook, is not just an absence of negativity. It's negativity. It's the negatives plus action. I want better. How do I do this? It's just like love isn't the opposite of hate and differences. Positives and negatives are tied together, because how do you see the good if you have no benchmark for the bad? I find people who are assiduously avoiding being negative never actually get to stop and enjoy anything. Because if you're avoiding the negatives, you're avoiding the positives too. And I see this in so many people. It is practice. It is an ongoing thing with Leanna Care's clients. And even just people that I do stuff with, they'll get a win. And I'll be, that's amazing. That's amazing. And then, they'll try to shrug it off. I'm like, no, this is a win. Take a minute and feel good about that win. And a lot of people don't know how to do it because they've been so trained to just, do better, get better, fix your weaknesses. You are never going to fix weaknesses. And I go back, well, you can improve some, but we understand the concept of a dump stat in gaming. We're just not going to focus on this playthrough, right? We understand that in order to build an effective character in a video game, you do have to focus on some strengths more than others and play to those strengths. Now, that doesn't mean that, if you find your character just say doesn't have enough HP, you can't pile a few more points in a fortitude to bring that up, right? It's never going to be your critical stat, but you can make it better. But that's in service of playing to your strengths, not constantly focusing on your weaknesses. And I find that so often people who have trauma, childhood trauma, adverse childhood events, and they call them adverse childhood events because, some people do heal from them, and they aren't defined by them, and it's there, but it's not this constant drain on their current existence. Every so often you'll think about it and go, I wish things had been different there, but they don't consume you, they don't control you, and they don't hold you back. They're a superhero origin story, right? I mean, Spider-Man isn't just about being bit by the radioactive spider, right? Spider-Man is also Uncle Ben dying, right? Superman is not just, leap tall buildings in a single bound or whatever ridiculous power set they give him this week. It's also Krypton blew up. He's the last son of Krypton, with a lot of notable exceptions, right? Batman and his parents, right? There tends to be this tragic, even Wonder Woman, now they're having this, they pull the, she can't return to Themyscira. Even her choice to leave, Paradise Island and go into the flawed world of man, that is a sacrifice, right? And she's giving up every relationship in her life, every support system she has to go and be Wonder Woman. And these characters aren't pitied for that, right? We look up to them because of that. I mean, Batman needs to own his shit a little better. Like, I don't understand, I guess, because the idea Superman was a baby, so he doesn't remember it, but Batman needs a rethink. Really, really, really needs a rethink. The Matt Reeves film started the process of going, hey, maybe we need to rethink these tropes a little. Not change them. Just be a little bit smarter about how we apply them, right? But, yeah. A lot of these superheroes, especially those early DC superheroes, but also, Marvel coming up in the 60s, these were children of survivors of the Depression. Everybody had something in their past. That was a very, very rough time to come up. And it inspired all these stories, and it inspired the creators to write stories about people who actively did good for the world. And they weren't just stories of sacrifice. They were also stories of superpowers. And I think maybe that's why I use them so much as metaphors. Because that's the way you change your narrative. Not, I'm damaged goods, I'm going to be defined by these horrible things that happened to me my whole life. No, it's a superhero origin story. Like, I'm Peter Parker, I'm Clark Kent, or I'm, pick the one. Peter Parker is an everyman middle-class guy, which is why a lot of people tend to pick them. I wish we had more female superheroes like this that had those sort of origin stories, that had something like that they chose, and things that are more relatable as opposed to, anyway, I wish we had more of those. Maybe I'll make some. I'm working on it. But, like Princess Sparkle Muffin, we're designing her as she's, a girly girl who liked fairy tale stories, and that's how she solved problems. That's her. And yes, she's a child of privilege, but, you'll find out more about her. But her whole tagline is kindness can be a superpower. That's her strength. And too often when people get put into therapy because of early life events or trauma or anxiety or depression, it focuses on what's wrong. And what I try to do, because, a lot of the Leanna Cares clients are also in therapy, but I try to build people up as well as focus on those difficult things. Because when you're struggling with something like that, it does start to feel like that's the most important part about you. And it's not. Everybody has something good in them. Even if they're just a really good listener and really caring, or, good with their hands, or good at fixing things or stuff like that. Everybody has skills that can help the people around. It's the Encanto thing, right? Like, oh, Mirabelle doesn't have a gift, but the gift is she's the main character in a freaking Disney movie that's now, the hot shit new Frozen song, right? That's a pretty good gift. But the way she had compassion and caring, and, people have strengths that they aren't given permission to feel good about, because we're so focused on diagnosis and mental illness and treatment, as opposed to that's just your origin story. What's your superpower connected to that, right? What are you good at? And how can you use what you're good at to start processing and healing from the bad, and, going on and having success and all that stuff in life, whatever success means to you. For me, no surprise. I'm a storyteller. Even when I do fact-based videos, it's a story, right? The way the information is presented, the way it's laid out, it's a story. I take people on a journey. And that's what I use. And, the more I use it, the better I get at it. And, a big thing for me was I had this really good/bad habit of having the second highest mark, the second highest grade. It was never the highest. It was always the second highest, and in everything, right? And eventually, I don't remember who pointed it out to me, but they're like, you notice it's always a different person who's higher than you in the different subjects. Well, okay, yeah. History was the only one. I was number one. But it's always a different person, but you're always up there. Yeah, that ain't nothing. It's like that decathlete, that all-round performer, the Mario skill set, But when you're always coming in second, you can't see that. It wasn't until I got out into, the world and entertainment and making stuff, and you realize it actually is better when you're a leader, when you're a manager, to be good enough to truly understand, not be Dunning-Kruger, right? Good enough to understand what people who you hire because they're better than you at things are telling you. You need enough knowledge to be able to know when you're being bullshitted. But you don't have to do it all yourself. You just need enough to know when someone's good, when someone's not good, and know how to get around your weaknesses. And if we spend so much time being afraid of our weaknesses, we never go, you know what? This is something, it's not going to get better. I need someone to backstop this weakness. I need to find someone to partner with to do the things I can't, because I can't do it all. And part of the reason people spin their wheels their entire lives or way too long is because they're so obsessed with working on what they're not good at, improving themselves, that they never go, you know what? I'm okay at not being the best at this. I'm going to get someone who is good at it, and I'm not going to touch it because my time is better spent doing the things I'm okay to good at. And there are some exceptions to this, obviously. If a lack of a particular skill is making you miserable, by all means, improve it. There are certain things that are just, if you don't learn to read, you're going to have problems in life, right? And there are certain things in terms of being a happier person that are the equivalent of learning to read. You know, boundary setting, reasonable goal setting, self-compassion, um knowing how to want things without it hurting all the time. These are skills that are taught and trained. And those are things I believe are essential to happiness, right? Being the absolute smartest person in a given subject is not. In fact, if you want to make a product other people are going to use, just being better than average is sometimes perfectly fine, you know? Um, and this is something we don't tell people because everybody wants their little budding genius, and it has fucked up 2 or 3 whole generations of kids. My God. Um, being a Gen Xer and being, it's funny because Gen Xers were the slackers before millennials were the slackers, and it's like everybody just sort of forgot that Gen Xers were the original slackers, and we're just totally good with that because we don't need you to pay attention to us. We're off doing our thing, right? I mean, yep, okay, you're right. I'll never amount to anything. I'm gonna go tootle around with this computer now, that kind of stuff. um there's and I talked to a lot of other Gen X people who are like, yeah, it's pretty funny. We're left out of the generational wars, and we're absolutely fine with that because we're doing our thing. We don't need that. We don't need the affirmation, the constant affirmation, the constant being seen in things, because one, we were never taught to expect it, but also we learned to create our own meaning in things. We learned to, like, in movies of the time, in like affirmational movies of the time, it was all about sort of the social role, like the whole Breakfast Club thing. Yeah, they were all a bunch of white people, and if they made that today, they probably wouldn't do that. But it was are you the jock, the nerd, the freak, the prom queen, all this stuff. What's your like place in society, as opposed to somebody who absolutely looks like you? I mean, shit, in the Breakfast Club, I was definitely more Ali Sheedy than Molly Ringwald, but not even, I forget the name of the character I was, but Molly Ringwald, oh, she's a redhead, you must like her. No, I didn't like Molly Ringwald's characters. I like what she did now in retrospect, but I never related to the characters she played. She was the good girl, the perfect girl, if there had been a character like Louisa around when I was a kid, I would be that. I connect to that, but I just realized recently that the female superheroes for a lot of girls are those main characters in Disney movies. They are. And call them princesses, dislike the princess branding all you want, but a lot of superhero guys are nobility. Black Panther, Thor. Yes, there's a lot of everymen, but there's Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, and she's another one. I'm like, her, I can see myself in her, at least as a kid, because she was weird, and she was creative, and she didn't need everything to be pretty. She liked dolls with, like, mismatched button eyes, That was me. That's still me. Cthulhu. But that's, and of course, Lilo's parents died when she was young. She had that tragic backstory as well. When you start forming your own identity, and when you start really being good with who you are and what made you who you are, that's when you get peace with your past. And a lot of people think that You need to make peace with your past to be okay with who you are. I did not find that was the case with me. There's a lot of things I went through. It's impossible to say, oh, that's okay, right? I'm in a post-forgiveness paradigm with certain things. Because certain things is it's not about whether you forgive the person or not, right? It's about, what does this say about me? What does this mean? What do I choose to make it mean? And that's where a lot of people say, oh, you forgive for yourself. You don't forgive for the other person, but that still puts pressure on a person to forgive. And I don't necessarily believe that's essential. If you can look at yourself and go, you know what? I'm basically a good person. I don't want to hurt other people. I want to help other people. I have things I need to learn. I have stuff I want to improve. I have places I want to go and things I want to accomplish I haven't done yet. But you know what? Me, right now, pretty decent. When you can get to that point, now, you can start looking back and going, you know what? That shit that I went through, I see how that fits into my compassion. I see how that fits into my empathy. I see how that fits into my ability to understand people who are different. I see how that fits into me being less judgmental than some other people. I'm more open to new ideas. I'm not so stuck in normal. All these are good things. Would I have been the person I am without the shit as well as the good things? No. And then you don't get into, oh, I reclaim and all that stuff. I guess it is, but for me, it was more, it wasn't that big affirmational, I love myself, all that stuff. For me, it was more, it happened. And it taught me these things. And that's not good or bad. What is good is what I choose to do about it, right? I choose to do things like these videos that are useful, that teach skills, that give people an easier ride than I had it. And I choose to do that. I choose to be positive. Remember I said, positivity and negativity are not opposites. Positive starts with identifying the negatives. If I can make somebody's journey easier than mine is, amazing. But that's not because of what happened to me. That's what I chose to do. And I did that. I actively made a choice. And that's what I feel good about. Stuff that happened in the past, I'm indifferent to. And that really is the best place to be. Because the idea of, there are certain things I'm grateful happened even though they were hard because they were good lessons. There are other things it's like, it happened and it made me aware of evil in the world. And that awareness of evil does influence how I do things and does influence what I choose to do. But they are still my choices. And I can take... pride is sort of the wrong word for me, but I can say I am a good person because of my choices, not because of my past. And that's something everyone can say. People who have been through it rougher, those good choices are things you can take pride in. You can look back and say, look, I am not doing things to other people just because they were done to me. And that's something to feel good about. And that's how you build resilience. Recognizing that your choices today are not just the products of your past. Your choices today are the products of who you are as a person now, with the good and the bad. So hopefully for people who are feeling like, oh my God, I had a bad childhood, there's no hope for me, that gives you a bit of hope. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. And sign up for a Leanna Care session if you want. Do one. Try it out. See how it goes. If some of these videos stir stuff up, sign up. Forms in the description box. Thanks for watching and be well.